Hey guys, it's Joseph, owner, operator, creator of the On30 Mosquito Creek Lumber Company, Swamp Log and Railroad, coming to you from the new train room. Blank walls, big ideas. Well, I'm here to tell you that we survived the layout move, barely. That wasn't too bad. There was a few things that could have been done a little bit different. And you know, it's hard. Hours and hours of work creating and building, doing scenery, layouts, you know, they're a labor of love. And to think that all that work going down into the garbage can or recycle bin or whatever to move, it's kind of hard to do. And I had a friend on Facebook, one of our followers, or was it on YouTube? Maybe both. Anyway, he asked a question in the comments about wanting to know if I could talk a little bit more about what I do, suggestions for helping move a layout without a lot of damage. You know, the dreaded saw. Anyway, that's a great idea because it's happened to me more than a dozen times where I've had to tear down a layout for a move due to work. And the last layout that I had, I thought was going to be a permanent thing. It was in a large basement and it was awesome and had special lights installed and everything was mounted into the walls and that whole thing, and ended up moving and really downsizing. So a lot of the pieces that I had built, I had to tear down and, you know, try to salvage the lumber. But the majority of the layout was destroyed and torn apart. Of course, I saved some track that I could, or rails, because most of it was all hand laid, but all the ties and the switches and scenery and things like that had to end up in the landfill, unfortunately. But as they say, it's better to have built a layout and torn it down than to never have built a layout at all, or something like that, I think. Anyway, thankfully, all those moves for me helped me figure out some tricks to disassemble the layout. But the key thing is you start before you even build the layout to start thinking about how you're going to take the thing apart, especially folks that are in the military, or like I was in a job career that ended up having multiple moves, either myself or my wife. So a year or two, and then off we went, and had lots of layouts in lots of U-Haul trucks. And some of it turned out good, some not so bad. So what I want to do is kind of go through a couple things that I did on the latest Mosquito Creek Lumber Company layout in order to make the move to here a lot easier. So let's get going with that, shall we? Now, I think the first thing you need to do is think about how big is too big. I've almost pushed the limits on the Mosquito camp section of the logging layout that we moved here to our new house. It was almost too long, too wide, too heavy to get through doors, and for two people with bad backs and hernias and things like that to move by ourselves. But we got it done. But there's some things that I would have done a little bit differently. It all always stems to whether or not you want to have a lot of gaps in the track and have those gaps be able to be separated so you don't have to tear the track apart. How big the layouts are. Maybe you want to just move things in the back of your SUV or car. I guess the one thing to remember is that there is going to be a little bit of damage and disruption. You can't help it when you're moving a layout that has fragile parts on it and scenery that can break and crack and fall away, or track that somehow gets hooked up on something and you'll end up pulling a rail all the way out. Those things can happen even if you're careful. I think I came off pretty good with not a lot of damage in this move. As I mentioned before, try to plan your track plan and where you're going to be dividing up your layout to take it apart or put it together, so you don't have like a 12 track big yard and a splice between the two where you're going to have to figure out how to put all those tracks back together. I try to keep the yards as one part, and then the drill tracks or the leaning main line coming into them, that's where you can divide your sections. The other thing is using lighter weight materials. Now back in the day, it was 3/4 inch plywood and big risers and hydrocal plaster on the window screen, and the thing weighed 5 million pounds, and there is no way to move those things. So now, rather than do all that heavy duty stuff, I'm kind of streamlining my list of materials that I use for building a layout. Now, as you can see on this cross section here, it's 2 inches of insulation foam, the kind that I use in building construction, extruded foam board, and 1x3 framework. I used to use 1x4s, and I used to have like 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch plywood for the sub base of the road bed. And I'm finding, other than the foam has a real weird acoustic thing where it really amplifies the sound of the trains going over the track, I'm going to try something a little bit different as I splice the new pieces together. I'm going to use some acoustic ceiling tiles, the kind that are in the drop ceilings in offices and things like that. Pretty inexpensive. It makes a lot of dust and mess when you cut it, but it takes spikes really well. It glues down to the foam, and you lay your track on that, and we're going to see if that helps with the sound deadening. I know I've put that over plywood and used that for my road bed material, and it comes in pretty wide sheets, so you can use that for yards and things like that too, as well as cut it down for the right of way on your main lines. And then the other thing that I do to make things a little bit lighter is use either paper mache or like a lightweight spackle instead of hydrocal or plaster or one of those other things that are really, really heavy once it's dry and kind of brittle too. The lightweight spackle that I use, since my layout is pretty flat there in the swamp, stays a little bit flexible, so it's less susceptible to getting cracks and breakage and things like that. One other tip, if you're going to be moving your layout and don't want to have to pick up 15 coffee cans of ballast and dirt and grass, is to make sure when you put your scenery materials down that you are securing it really, really well with the old white glue and the wet water, getting everything soaked really good and solid on there. And that helps when you go to move your layout, because a lot of times you're going to have to tip it on its side to get it through a door or whatever, and that'll keep everything from falling off. This particular time I had some structures that were glued down. I had trees that were in place, lights and things like that that normally I would have taken off the layout before the move, but this time they were secured so well that they're not going to be in the way, and I'm not going to be laying anything on top of that. So they made the trip really well, and it was kind of good. Now I don't have to reinstall those things. I did take as much off the layout as I could and packed them all away very, very carefully in boxes, and so it's all ready to go right back on and on the layout. Another another thing that I did, hold on, was photograph the layout before you start taking it apart. That way you do some detail shots, take your phone and shoot some wide angle shots overhead. That way you can see exactly where everything was before you take it off the layout. Oh, the truck was over here, and this gas pump was here, and the trees were over there. And then when you go to put your layout back together, just study those photos. Oh, know how to do it, unless you want to change things up. And some areas on my layout, I'm really happy the way they turned out. So I probably will put everything right back to where it was and do my experimenting and creativity on the new connecting pieces for my existing layout. And then the other thing is, because our layouts, unless you're using dead rail or blue rail or something like that, where the power is in the actual locomotives and not in the track, is you're going to have a lot of wiring underneath. And the other thing that I did was add connectors to like the bus lines and connectors for the lines, the power lines for the lights and things like that, which made it relatively easy just to pull those apart, get them through the holes in the cross pieces of the bench work. And now when I put the pieces back together, click those back in and we're good to go again, rather than trying to strip wires and get soldered and all that kind of stuff. I found that to be a pretty good tip too. So I like to say that this is going to be the last time I ever move a layout. Who knows? You know, never say never. I'm looking forward to getting some of the pieces back in here. And in the next video, I'm going to show you how I've been planning out the layout, using some templates to make sure that everything fits in this room. And we'll get going on that one in the next episode. But in the meantime, I got my work cut out for me. I got to get this layout back up and running. So in the meantime, thanks so much for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Tell your friends, your model railroading friends, your railroad friends, friends of friends that like the swamp and like drinking coffee, to like and subscribe to the Mosquito Creek Lumber Company On30 Swamp Log and Railroad. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me. Also, check us out on Facebook and Instagram. Become followers there. And until the next time, keep swatting them skeeters.